Alright guys, I'm out here working on the 98 Honda Superhawk 996 motor that is locked up and has some issues. I'm pretty sure it's the bearings, but we're going to start tearing this motor down. I'm going to start with taking the valve covers off. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this video. I'm not going to do probably step by step, but I'll try to fill you in on what I'm doing as we tear it down to try to find out what the problem is with it. So I've already got some things loose that I had taken partially off before, or had off and just put back on, so kind of keep them in place, like these the clutch cover here, and I think I have the stator cover on the other side taken off, and I did have this valve cover off, so it's not all the way on. But first thing I'm going to do is kind of blow the motor off, because there's some goop that's inside here that I don't want to fall in any parts of the motor. So I'm going to plug these intake holes off, which really won't matter probably because I'm taking them off anyhow, but let's keep the debris out of it. So that's how I'm going to start it, and I'll try to fill you in on things as I go. I have the manual that I'm following, and I suggest you follow the manual as well, because I may miss some steps or not document every step that I do on this. So if you're doing a similar project, you may want to have that manual handy. All right, so let's get started. We're going to blow this thing off and then take the valve covers off. All right, so I removed the chain tensioner, removed the chain guide. It's just got 3 bolts here, 2 at the top, 1 on the side. Here's the guide out. And so I got that out of the way. What I plan on doing is I've got little baggies that I'll label everything and put everything in its own bag. So I'll probably do all this upper cam stuff in one bag, and try to keep it separated like that for the front and the rear. All right, we've got the front cams out, and everything looks good on the front cams. No excessive wear. Yeah, they both look really good. So we're going to continue taking this down. We just had to take the cam gears off. I just held the chain here to keep it from falling in. Then pulled the bolts off the top, pulled the cams out. Not very difficult. The only thing I had a little bit of an issue with was, since they had you take the chain tensioner out first, when I went to take the first bolt loose, I started with the intake cam because the bolt was up there, and when I started to take it out, it jumped a couple teeth on the chain, so I had to just use a screwdriver and kind of hold it, pry it in there to keep it from rotating while I broke all the bolts loose. But they came off without any issues. So we're going to pull. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little sheet up in my book with the size shims that are in the intake and exhaust. When I checked the valve clearance before I did this, the exhaust manifolds were a little tight, so it might be a good time to go ahead and change those shims out while I have this all apart. So, but I will make a note of what's in it now, and continue this teardown. Okay, so I pulled the shims out, and you couldn't read any of them. Usually they have a number on them, but these didn't have any numbers on them. But I measured both of them. The intake was 1.86, and the exhaust was 1.77. So that was according to my Harbor Freight micrometer. So that's about where we're at. So we're going to go ahead and bag these items up and start taking more apart. All right, guys, got the front head off. I took out the 6 bolts that hold the head on, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there's 6 here, and then there's 2 smaller ones that go down in. So I took the 8 bolts out, but the 6 head bolts here, you have to do those in a crisscross sequence and do a little at a time. Got them out. Good news is this cylinder head, piston wall and everything looks good. There's good cross hatching still in it. Doesn't look like any damage where any valves may have hit the pistons or anything. So that all looks really good because, like I said, the chain tensioner on these is one of the weak links on this bike. So that all looked good. Came off really easy. So now we're going to move on to the back one and do the same thing. Take that one out, and then we'll see about getting these chain guides out and moving on. But so far this front cylinder looks really good, so that is definitely a good sign. So we'll move on to start the back one next. All right, so I went ahead and pulled the rear head off the same way I did the front one. I didn't record it because it was pretty much the same thing. The only thing different I did was I left the chain tensioner in until I had the cam bolts broken loose. Okay, don't know why my camera shut off, but the only thing I did different was I left the chain tensioner on until I broke the bolts loose on the cam gears. That way it didn't try to jump chain or anything or have to fight against that. And just broke them all loose, then took the chain tensioner out, then finished taking the bolts out. From what I can see of the cylinder over here, looks good. No damage to it. So that's still, and all the cams looked good. No grinding, no wear there. So that looked good. So that tells me our damage is still down at the bottom of this engine where I'm thinking it is in the bearings. So we're going to see what we can get into next and how much further we can tear this thing down today. All right, the next thing we're going to do is get into removing the clutch primary gears and all the clutch stuff. So we're going to remove this cover first, and I already had this cover off, so most of the bolts are already broken loose. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop those off, and we'll get ready to pull this cover off. All right, here we go with the cover remove. So now we're going to remove these bolts around here that hold the clutch plates in, and we're going to take that off next. All right, so I got this nut out. I had to do the way they had smashed it down. Let me see if I can. So the way they had smashed this collar down to lock this nut in, they had smashed it down so much that I couldn't get any punch or anything under it to bend that collar up to get it off. So I wound up having to take a Dremel in there and just grind out the inside of this nut a little bit just to get that punch out. And then I put a socket on there as a 30 millimeter 12 point socket. Hit it with the impact and it came right off. I locked it in with this wrench here that locked it down. Had to lock the motor down as well just so it wouldn't twist or turn. So we got that off. So now we're going to remove this whole center part here. This, I guess it's considered the primary gear. So we're going to take that all off now. Okay, now that we've got the primary and everything removed, we're going to go to the other side and we're going to remove the flywheel. So that'll be the next part. So let's move on to the flywheel. All right, so we got the flywheel off. The next thing we're going to take off is the oil pump. So we're going to move along to the other side, back to the oil pump, and see if we can get that off. One thing I'm happy with, just looking at this motor a little bit the cylinders. I had already looked at the front cylinder, but the back cylinder still has the hatch marks in it. A little weird groove right there, but other than that, everything looks pretty good from what I've seen in the rear cylinder as well. So we're going to move around to the oil pump, and that'll be the next thing to take out. All right, the next thing we're going to do is remove the oil pump. I had to put the clutch basket back on here, and I'll show you why in just a minute, but you need that on to hold this oil pump from turning. I went ahead and broke the bolt loose, so now I'm going to take, I'll show you what I'm talking about here on this oil pump. All right, so if you try to loosen this bolt here on the oil pump, this whole unit spins. So you have to put that clutch basket back on here just to hold this in place. So you can take this bolt, loosen that bolt. So now I'm going to take that bolt out and get ready to take the oil pump out. Underneath, I've already removed this strainer a while back, and here's inside my oil pan. This is the dowel for, goes right there. Just drop it in. Okay, I don't know why that shut off, but now that I've got all the bolts out, you can kind of, and the strainer off, you can kind of wiggle it back and forth a little bit and get the oil pump right out. So there's the oil pump that's out. It has two dowels on the bottom, so make sure you have those dowels. And so we're going to bag this up with the rest of the oil pump stuff and continue moving on. But there's the inside of the motor. Get a better look at it. I've got it just laying on its side. So I'm going to take a look at a couple things in here while I've got it over on its side, and then we'll move on. This gear here, so I just cracked it loose. This is the primary gear drive, and spring just fell out. See where those springs go. So we're going to remove this next, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so we got all those out of the way. We're going to take the chain guides off next. I want to show you something, and I think this may be the problem with this motor, and this is what I was thinking all along. Don't think you're supposed to have that play in there. Not like that. So we're going to take these chain guides off. We've got the chain guides on the front of the motor too. So we're going to take these rear ones off, and then we'll take the front ones off. All right, so I've got the rear chain guides out, taking the front ones out now. It's kind of use a little bit of an odd bolt. I had to use this crazy special socket that I happen to have, and luckily it worked on them to get those broken loose. So now we're gonna, like I said, see, it's just kind of a weird star-shaped thing. I don't know how to use that, but who knows. So get this rear guide out, or front guide I should say. Get that out. It's got little inserts that go in here, and then the bolt goes through the front side here. I just want to put those back together so I can kind of get a picture of them and mental picture. And then we've got the chain. Gonna remove the chain out of here. And now we've got the front chain out. Getting closer, getting this thing completely torn apart. So I'm going to bag these up, and then we'll get ready to take that drive gear out there, the starter drive gear. And then I think the next thing we do is take the bolts out to take the case apart. So we're getting real close. Okay, the next thing I'm removing is the starter reducer and gear. I just put a magnet on this shaft, and it pulls it out. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and then I think we're ready to start breaking the case down. Okay, I got all the rear case bolts broken loose and removed. You do it in a crisscross pattern, Just a mental note to myself and to anybody who may be watching this, the smallest length bolt goes right here. So now we're going to flip it up and take out the front ones. Alright guys, so I've got all the bolts pulled out of here except for these three. These two front ones are longer than the rest of the bolts. Oops, I just stepped on something. And this one back here is shorter. So as you can see, it's shorter than the others. And then these two up front, get those out with the washers. As you can see there, are longer than the rest. So all of them are the same size except for these two over here. And the one back here is shorter. It has a cutout back there. So that'll be good to remember. I've got all these other ones broken loose. You just have to take them out. You do these in a crisscross pattern as well. And so get this out. We should be ready to pull this case apart. All right, these two bolts are different sizes as well. Here, this one, and this one down here. The one to the far side, which would actually be the left side of the motorcycle because the motor slipped upside down right now, is shorter. All right, so now we've got these front bolts to take out. I'm sure this one's probably going to be shorter than the rest of them. It's 12 millimeters and a 10 millimeters, I believe it is, on these. So we're going to pull those out next. All right, so I think I've got all the bolts out that I can see that need to come out. So I think it's time to try to separate this thing. So I'm going to look around again real quick, make sure there's nothing I missed. And if there's anything I need to tell you, I will. But I think we're ready to start pulling this thing apart. Okay, got the two halves apart, and there's a little bit of wear on the crank, but not terrible. And the bearings look like they have some wear on it as well, especially this outer one here. So we're going to go ahead and pull the rod bearings, check those out, and see what we have there. Alright guys, so we've got this motor broken totally down and found the problem. Here's the crank. Really bad groove here. And it definitely spun the bearings. When I got to taking this out, one bearing was on top of the other. And I don't know if you can see on the camera, it picks up the groove that it made in this bearing, flattened it out, and just, yep. So that was the problem, and that's what I thought it was, you know. And now we're gonna have to find out what to do with this crank because it's bad. I don't know if it can be fixed, so might be looking for a new crank. Everything else looked pretty good on this bike, but that explains where the metal came from. And yeah, fun stuff. All right, so we'll get back to see what we can do with this, see if I can find a crank, and we'll go from there.